Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 6 of Tour of Japan, the review series for the GT300 and 500 Super GT class racing cars that are of course featured on GT6. And in this episode we're featuring probably one of my personal favourite JGTC models, possibly my favourite of the GT300 class. It is the RE Amemiya RX-7. Now there are 3 different versions of this car to choose from. There are the standard version, the premium 2006 version, which is the one you see here, and there's also a base model version of this version, which is of course paintable, but apart from that is exactly the same. Now this premium model is superior to the non-premium in terms of sheer spec. However, the differences in spec aren't all that significant. The PP is only 1 point higher, the weight of the 2 vehicles is exactly the same, the power to weight ratio is a little bit more, the torque is 10 pound-feet more on the premium model, and it has a whopping 1 horsepower more when fully tuned. However, for those relatively minuscule advantages, you pay an extra 200 grand. Now, obviously, you're also paying for a premium model, which means you have far better graphics and a fully detailed interior, and arguably better rendered performance, especially handling, than the standard models tend to have. But if you're looking for pure value for money, the non-premium is technically better, because 200 grand less is very good, considering it's certainly not 200 grand worse. It may have slightly lower specs, but it's still a brilliant machine. However, what your head tells you is better value is not as much of an influence on our decisions, for me personally anyway, as the car which you just want to buy. And let's face it, we'd all rather buy the premium model, even if it is 200 grand more. So even though I'm telling you that the lower model is better value, and even though I do believe that myself, I would still rather use this one, of course. Now, that said, even a 500 grand model, which this one is still far from being expensive. That's still brilliant value for a racing car of its calibre, especially when you consider that this is a GT300 model, not a full-on 500 model. However, even though it is the lower of the 2, do not underestimate this car's ability. It is a seriously quick machine. It's highly competitive, and thanks to its triple rotor engine, it's got very, very strong performance, especially for the GT300 class. Now, the engine is rated as being around a 2 litre in conventional terms, although it's more difficult to classify it for rotaries, and as I said, it is a triple rotor. And when fully tuned, it produces a very impressive 725 horsepower and 492 pound-feet of torque, which, although that may not sound that much, that's pretty good for a small capacity engine. Now, it weighs 1100 kilos, which is exactly the same as the non-premium model, and is among the lighter models of the JGTC class. The PP, when fully tuned, is 624, which is 1 PP higher than the non-premium version, and the power-to-weight ratio is a pretty impressive 659 horsepower per tonne. So, as you'd expect, being lightweight with a high power-to-weight ratio, a high rev-happy, compact, lightweight rotary engine, and being an RX-7, which is known for being a very nimble road car, not surprisingly, the RE Amemiya makes an excellent track machine. Now, as I alluded to earlier, it is a very strong all-round Super GT car, despite being in the lower of the 2 categories. And the reason why I say that is because this car, unlike many of its GT300 brethren, is capable of a higher top speed than many of the GT500 cars. This car can do 230 miles per hour with a low drag setting, and that is actually faster than some of the Skyline and Supra GT500 models. So it's a very, very strong performance car, and one of the quickest, if not the quickest, of the GT300 class. Now, although it does have a higher top speed than many of its rivals and even some of the higher class, it does still take a little bit longer, understandably, than many of the GT500 cars, which have far more power and torque to their advantage. So although the top speed is technically better, it does take longer to get there than they do. So there are very few tracks where that's a real advantage rather than just a theoretical advantage. In real situations, what matters most is arguably grip and handling, and thankfully this car has both of those in spades. Now, the RX-7 road car is pretty well known for being a tail-happy vehicle, but the race model, although obviously, as with racing cars of any type, you can get the tail out, handles extremely well and has a huge amount of grip at pretty much any speed. And thanks to its relatively compact size and lightweight, it's very, very nimble. And although it doesn't have as much torque punch as some of the more powerful and more torquey models, it has the advantage of being able to maintain a higher average speed, which works to your advantage on technical tracks such as Suzuka, for instance, or Laguna Seca, or Ascari, for example. Tracks where top speed doesn't really matter, and what you need is a high average speed through all of the corners. That is where this car really comes into its own, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much power your Pennzoil Skyline, for instance, has, it's not going to outmaneuver an RE Amemiya RX-7. It's just not going to happen. So I would recommend being selective about where you choose to use the car, but it's a brilliant all-round model. So that's it for this review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.